They said she was a curse, a shame to her grandmother's lineage. An 18-year-old girl whose name had become a warning in the entire community. Her story began not in wealth nor in peace, but in the ashes of rejection and hunger. In a small, forgotten Yoruba village where gossip traveled faster than light, lived a girl who carried both sin and sorrow on her shoulders. Her name was Tayo, an orphan, a mother, and a thief. But what no one in the village knew, not the elders, not even the pastor who prayed for her, was that destiny had written something extraordinary for her. Something that would shake the very foundations of the same community that condemned her. Because on the 6th day, before the world decided her fate, something happened. This is her story. Tayo had always been the girl everyone pointed at in whispers. She grew up under her grandmother's fragile care, a wrinkled woman named Mama Teni, whose eyes held more prayers than strength. Each morning, the girl would walk through the narrow, dusty paths of Ayetoro village, her baby strapped to her back, searching for food or trouble. Sometimes, both. Her hands were not evil, just desperate. She stole gari from bowls, yams from barns, and clothes left drying on fences. And when she was caught, she would kneel, trembling, and swear she'd never do it again. But hunger was louder than shame. By the time she turned 18, Tayo's reputation was sealed. Men used her, women despised her. Even the little children would laugh when they saw her pass. One humid evening, as the sunset blared into the sky, the community gathered at the village square. The air buzzed with anger and gossip. And then the verdict came, cold and final. She was to be banished. 7 days. That was all they gave her to pack her few belongings and leave the only home she had ever known. Mama Teni cried that night, clutching her granddaughter like a child. She was too old to follow her anywhere, too weak to start again. But Tayo just sat there, staring into the dark, her baby asleep on her lap. The tears wouldn't come. She was too tired to cry. The next morning, she went to the one place she'd never dared to enter, the small church by the road. People stared when she walked in barefoot, her wrapper faded, her eyes swollen. The pastor, a calm man in his 50s, welcomed her gently. She knelt before him, her voice trembling. She told him everything: the stealing, the shame, the ultimatum, the fact that she had nowhere to go. He didn't scold her, he prayed. Then, with quiet compassion, he said, "Tayo, your story is not over yet. Change your ways and watch what God will do." He asked a young woman from the church to follow up with her. For the next few days, Tayo came to every service, singing softly, eyes closed, her baby sleeping in her arms. But by the 4th day, she stopped coming. The church members wondered if she had given up or disappeared. The pastor prayed for her again, asking heaven to find her before it was too late. Meanwhile, in her small hut, Tayo packed her things slowly. Her time was running out. The 6th day was almost here, and she had no idea that destiny was walking straight towards her door. The 6th day dawned quietly over Ayetoro. The harmattan breeze carried a chill that crept through the cracks of Tayo's hut. She sat on the floor beside her sleeping baby, lost in thought, counting the final hours before her exile. Then came the knock, that single sound, that soft but commanding knock that changed everything. She hesitated at first, her heart pounding like a drum inside her chest. No one ever visited her. No friend, no family, no one. When she finally opened the door, she saw a man, tall, neatly dressed, holding a black briefcase. His accent was polished, his tone calm. He introduced himself as Barrister Adebayo from Lagos, and then he said words she could barely process. He claimed to represent the estate of her late father, Chief Adedeji Alabi, a wealthy businessman who had owned lands, houses, and businesses across the region. The same man she had heard of only through gossip. The man her late mother had described as a man too proud to claim his own blood. Tayo stood there in silence, clutching her baby tightly, her mind spinning. She thought it was a cruel joke,
shook. She had been lied to too many times before. But the lawyer showed her documents, birth certificates, legal statements, even her mother's old photograph signed in her father's handwriting. He told her that Chief Adedaji had passed away years ago, leaving behind no other child. Everything he owned was now hers. She stared at him, unable to speak. The same villagers who had called her a thief, who had mocked her for stealing a few tubers of yam, had no idea she owned half the land beneath their feet. Barrister Adebayo explained that there had been a long search for her. Her father's lawyer had been instructed to find his lost daughter, but with no trace of her mother after she left Lagos, the search had gone cold. Until recently, when a pastor's charity list included her name, Tayo Adedaji, that was how they found her. Tayo wept quietly that night. For years, she had begged the world for crumbs, not knowing she already had a banquet waiting in her name. The next morning, the lawyer drove her to town. It was the first time she had ever been inside a car. Her baby cooed on her lap as she stared through the window, watching the familiar dusty roads slip behind her. She was leaving Ayetoro, not as an exile, but as a queen reclaiming her crown. When they arrived at the city office, the lawyer laid out the papers, proof of ownership for lands, shops, bank accounts, and several houses. One of them was the very story building she had once broken into to steal. She remembered that night, how she had crept into the yard, trembling with fear, stealing leftover food from the kitchen. She remembered the housemaid who chased her out with a broom. That same house now had her name on the title deed. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Her tears flowed freely, but this time, they were tears of freedom. Barrister Adebayo smiled and said quietly, "Your father may have left this world, but he didn't forget you. You've suffered enough, Miss Adedaji. It's time you live." Tayo moved into one of her new homes, a small but beautiful bungalow near the outskirts of the city. There, she began to rebuild her life. She enrolled her baby in a daycare. She started attending church again, not as the outcast, but as a woman finally seen and accepted. Weeks passed, her clothes changed, her laughter returned, and her story began to travel, whispered first among those who had mocked her, then carried from one mouth to another like wildfire. The people of Ayetoro couldn't believe it. The same girl they banished was now the new landlady of several houses, including some owned by their most respected elders. Rumors turned into confusion. Confusion turned into regret, and regret into shame. Those who had once cursed her name now greeted her with trembling smiles. Even the same men who denied her child began to whisper again, each trying to claim they had always believed in her. But Tayo had changed. She no longer spoke with anger or pride. She simply smiled, quietly, gracefully, as though she had forgiven the world long before it knew it had wronged her. But deep inside, she knew something else was coming. The story wasn't over. For every miracle, there is a test, and destiny often circles back to finish what it began. Because just when she thought her new life had found peace, an unexpected visitor appeared at her gate, a familiar face, someone she never imagined would seek her out again. And that was how the real battle began. The past was not done with Tayo. It had only changed its mask. The new house was peaceful, almost too peaceful. Each morning, sunlight streamed through white curtains, casting gold across the tiled floor. Tayo would sit by the window with a cup of tea, her baby asleep nearby, and wonder how her life had changed so suddenly. She had come from dust and despair. Now she woke up in comfort, in a house she once feared to enter. But peace, as she soon learned, can be fragile, especially when the past refuses to die quietly. One Thursday afternoon, as she arranged flowers on the table, she heard the gate creak open. At first, she thought it was the gateman, but when she stepped outside, her heart froze. Standing there was Wali, one of the men who had once mocked her, one of those who had denied her pregnancy. He looked nervous now, his once proud shoulders bowed. He greeted her softly, using a voice she didn't recognize. He said he had come to ask for forgiveness. Tayo listened in silence, her face calm. Inside, her emotions twisted, anger, pity, disbelief, all fighting for space. She wanted to scream, to remind him of the humiliation he caused her, but instead, she said nothing. He apologized again, his voice trembling. He claimed he was ready to take responsibility for the child now, that he had changed, that he wanted a second chance. Tayo smiled faintly, not in mockery, but in quiet realization. The same people who had called her death were now trying to wash their guilt with sweet words. She told him gently that her life had moved on, that she had forgiven him, but forgiveness was not an invitation. Then she walked back inside and closed the door. That night, she couldn't sleep. She stood before her mirror, staring into it like a confession. This time, she didn't see a thief or an heiress. She saw both, the same Dell, the same blood. One had suffered so that the other could rise. She touched the glass gently, whispering to herself, maybe this is who I was meant to be all along, broken so I could be rebuilt. The next morning, she decided to do something new, something good. She began funding small projects in Ayeturu, water wells, school renovations, and food drives for widows. She never mentioned her name. The donations came quietly through the same church that had prayed for her. Slowly, whispers began to spread again, not of scandal this time, but of gratitude. People wondered who the mysterious benefactor was. No one guessed it was Tayo. But destiny wasn't done with her yet, for even blessings can attract shadows. And as she stood on the balcony one evening, watching the sunset, she noticed a black car parked across the street. It had been there for days, silent, still, watching. And in that moment, a cold shiver ran down her spine. Because deep within her heart, she knew something from her past was coming back for her. The story of Tayo Adejaji was far from over. For weeks, the black car remained. Every evening, Tayo would draw her curtains and glance through the slit, and there it was, parked beneath the almond tree, silent, almost patient. Whoever sat inside never came to her gate, never knocked, never left a note, just watched. At first, she tried to convince herself it was nothing, maybe a neighbor's visitor, maybe coincidence, but the feeling wouldn't leave her. The weight of unseen eyes pressed on her every night. She began to remember the days of her old life, the fear of being caught, the shame of being chased. Only this time, she wasn't the thief. Someone else was chasing her. Then, one morning, the car disappeared. For 2 days, she didn't see it, and she almost began to relax until the letter came. Folded neatly, no return address, slipped under her door. It carried no name, only words written in hurried strokes. You took what is not yours, you'll pay for it. Her hands trembled as she read it. Who could have sent such a thing? Was it one of the men from her past? Or someone angry about her inheritance? She called Barrister Debayo immediately. He came that same afternoon, his face dark with concern. He assured her the estate transfer was legitimate. Every property, every account, all legally hers. But he also admitted something new. There had been a dispute, a hidden one, between her late father's relatives. They never accepted her mother. And though the will was airtight, resentment ran deep. It was possible, he said quietly, that someone wanted to scare her away. That night, Tayo didn't sleep. Every sound felt louder, the ticking of the clock, the rustle of the curtains, the whisper of wind against the windows. But through her fear, something inside her began to shift. She had survived worse, and she would not run this time. The next morning, she returned to Ayetoro. Not in shame, but in quiet power. The community was buzzing with gossip the moment her car pulled in. Children pointed, women whispered. The girl they had banished was back, dressed in white lace and calm confidence. She went straight to the community leaders. The same men who had given her 7 days to leave now bowed their heads in discomfort. She thanked them, not sarcastically, but sincerely. She said their rejection had pushed her towards her destiny. The meeting was silent. Not one elder could meet her eyes. After that day, Tayo began investing directly in the community. She built a small vocational center, teaching young girls tailoring and crafts. She provided scholarships for children of widows, and every month she sent food and medicine to the elderly. Ayetoro began to change. The whispers that once condemned her now carried her name with reverence. But still, she never told anyone about the letter until one night, 3 weeks later, when the fire came. It started quietly, the sound of crackling wood at first, then the sudden roar of flame. By the time her neighbors noticed, her bungalow was already engulfed. Tayo walked to smoke choking her lungs, her baby crying in confusion. She stumbled through the heat, clutching her child to her chest, her eyes burning. Outside, voices screamed her name as villagers rushed with buckets and panic. When she finally made it out, coughing, trembling, her world burned behind her. The roof caved in with a thunderous crash. Her home, her new beginning, turned to ash before her eyes. And just as the flames dimmed, someone shouted. Near the fence, half hidden in the grass, lay a small black briefcase. Inside, burned at the edges, was another letter. This time it read, "You were warned. Leave now, or next time you won't escape." The police came. Questions were asked, statements taken, suspicions raised. But there were no fingerprints, no witnesses, no trail. Barrister Adebayo moved her temporarily to a guest house in town, promising tighter security. But even in safety, her mind kept circling the same thought. Who would hate her enough to do this? She thought of her father's family, of greed and inheritance. She thought of Wale and Tunji, of humiliation turned envy. She thought of the old community leaders, ashamed of how they treated her. But the truth was still a shadow, and sometimes shadows wait for light before they strike again. Despite the pain, Tayo refused to fall apart. She told herself the fire had only burned wood, not her destiny. If her past couldn't destroy her, neither would her enemies. She started again, rebuilding, this time stronger, wiser, unafraid. Each day she rose earlier, prayed longer, and smiled wider. And though her nights were still haunted by the glow of fire and the sound of her child's cries, she held on to one truth. Every trial was a test, and every test had a reason. Little did she know, the truth she was searching for was already close, watching her quietly, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. Because sometimes, the hands that light the fire are closer than we think. And for Tayo Adediji, the trial of fire had only just begun.
The fire was supposed to destroy her, but instead it purified her. Everything that could be burnt away, her fears, her shame, her doubt, had turned to smoke, and what remained was strength. Weeks turned into months. Tayo's story spread far beyond Ayetoro. Newspapers wrote about her courage, from outcast to philanthropist. Women came from other towns to meet her, to hear her speak about forgiveness, about faith, about finding grace in pain. But behind her radiant smile, a question still lingered. Who had tried to end her life? Who had written those cruel letters? And why did it all feel so personal, so close? Then one quiet evening, as the harmattan wind swept through her balcony, Barrister Adebayo arrived unannounced. His face was pale, his voice shaky, hesitant. He told her he had discovered something she deserved to know. The investigation into the fire had unearthed strange financial activity, withdrawals from her late father's old accounts that only one other person had access to, someone she knew, someone she trusted. Tayo listened in silence, her heart heavy. The barrister placed a small brown file on the table. Inside were copies of documents, signed, sealed, dated, and when her eyes caught the signature, her breath caught in her throat. It was the name of the man who had helped her rebuild everything, the man who had prayed for her when no one else would, the pastor. For a long time, she couldn't speak. She remembered his kindness, his prayers, his encouragement. He had been the first to see something good in her, or so she thought. But now, it seemed he had seen opportunity. The documents showed how he had secretly funneled money from her inheritance through the church's development fund, how he had manipulated her trust, positioning himself quietly at the center of her affairs, and how when the lawyer began asking questions, he had tried to erase the trail with fire. Tayo felt a strong rise inside her, not anger, but heartbreak. Betrayal from enemies hurts, but betrayal from those who once saved you cuts deeper than any wound. That night, she sat alone in her room, staring at the ashes of an old photograph she had salvaged from the fire.
her mother holding her as a baby. She whispered into the silence, "Maybe the people meant to save us sometimes break us first, so we can learn to stand on our own." By dawn, she made her decision. She would not fight with rage. She would let the law speak for her. The authorities moved swiftly. Evidence mounted. The truth unfolded like a bitter sunrise. The pastor had collaborated with one of her late father's distant cousins, hoping to scare her away and take control of the remaining estate. The fire had been their desperate last move. The news broke across the community. Shock rippled through Ayetoro. The same people who once saw the pastor as a holy man now bowed their heads in silence. Taya didn't attend the court hearings. She had forgiven him already. She didn't need revenge. She needed peace. And peace came quietly, like rain after the harmattan dust. She built again, from the ashes, from the pain, from the lessons. Her new house stood taller, stronger, a symbol of rebirth. Inside, on her living room wall, hung a single framed quote: "What was meant to destroy me became the fire that refined me." As the years passed, she became a voice for others like her, young women lost in poverty, shame, and rejection. She spoke in churches, schools, and gatherings, telling her story not as tragedy, but as transformation. She said, "Sometimes the world will give you 7 days to live, but God only needs one moment to rewrite your destiny." The audience always wept because her voice carried the truth of someone who had lived through the flames and come out shining. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the palm trees, Taya sat with her now grown daughter on the balcony. The little girl who once cried through the nights of hunger and fire was now in secondary school, bright and full of laughter. They watched the golden light fade, and Taya smiled softly. She had nothing left to prove, no past left to hide, no fear left to conquer. She had learned that sometimes destiny waits for you in the darkest places, in shame, in rejection, in exile, only to rise when the world thinks you're finished. Tayo Adejoji's name became a story, not of scandal, but of survival. The thief the world cast out became the light it couldn't ignore. And the same Ayetoro that once banished her now celebrated her. Every wall that had shut her out became a door she opened for others. Because when grace decides to find you, no fire, no curse, and no past stand in its way. From ashes to destiny. That was her journey. That was her victory. If this story touched your heart today, don't keep it to yourself. Please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring African stories that remind us no matter how dark the night feels, the morning will always come.